What you are about to hear is a work of fiction. The people, places, and events depicted in this story are products of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual individuals, living or deceased, or to real situations is purely coincidental. These stories may explore themes of crime, injustice, and human suffering. While fictional, they reflect real emotions and difficult truths that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
You're not who you said you were, are you? Jessica's voice trembled as she stared at the computer screen, her world crashing down around her. But let's start from the beginning. Before we go on, consider subscribing to the channel to be notified as new stories are published. Please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know just how far our stories reach. Jessica Turner had always been the type of person who saw the good in everyone. At 45, she possessed a warmth that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Her auburn hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail during her 12-hour shifts at City General Hospital, and her green eyes sparkled with genuine kindness when she spoke to patients. Even after her divorce from Tom 2 years earlier, she maintained an optimistic outlook on life, though the loneliness sometimes crept in during quiet moments. "Mom, you're scrolling through that dating app again," Emma observed from the kitchen doorway. Her 17-year-old frame leaning against the door jamb with the casual confidence that came with being on the cusp of adulthood. Her dark hair, so much like her father's, framed a face that held both her mother's kindness and a sharp intelligence that often surprised adults. Jessica looked up from her phone, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I'm just looking, sweetheart. It's not like I'm actually going to meet anyone." "Why not?" Emma moved into their small but cozy living room, settling onto the couch beside her mother. The afternoon sun streamed through their apartment windows, casting warm shadows across the worn but comfortable furniture. "You deserve to be happy, Mom. Dad's already moved on with that yoga instructor." The mention of Tom's new relationship sent a familiar pang through Jessica's chest, but she pushed it aside. "It's complicated, Em, dating at my age, especially online. I wouldn't even know where to start." Emma grinned and gently took the phone from her mother's hands. "Lucky for you. I'm practically a digital native. Let me help you set up a proper profile." Over the next hour, Emma helped Jessica select photos and craft a profile that honestly represented who she was: a dedicated nurse, loving mother, and woman ready for a new chapter in her life. They laughed together as Emma coached her mother through the basics of online dating etiquette. "Remember, Mom, if someone seems too good to be true, they probably are," Emma said, handing the phone back. "And always trust your instincts." Jessica nodded, though part of her wondered if her instincts were still reliable after the failure of her marriage. 3 days later, Jessica received her first message that made her heart skip a beat. David Mitchell's profile showed a ruggedly handsome man in his early 50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. His bio described him as a construction engineer currently working on a major infrastructure project in Dubai. His message was refreshingly different from the typical one-liners she'd been receiving. "Hi, Jessica," it read. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but your profile genuinely caught my attention. You have such a warm smile, and I was touched by what you wrote about helping others through your nursing career. I'm currently working overseas, but I'd love to get to know you better if you're interested in chatting." Jessica found herself reading the message 3 times before responding. David seemed articulate, respectful, and genuinely interested in who she was as a person rather than just her appearance. Their correspondence began innocently enough. David would message her during what he claimed were his evening hours in Dubai, which coincidentally aligned perfectly with Jessica's morning routine before work. He shared stories about his construction projects, asked thoughtful questions about her life, and seemed genuinely interested in Emma's college preparations. "He sounds almost too perfect," Rebecca, Jessica's younger sister, observed during their weekly coffee date at their favorite cafe downtown. Rebecca was everything Jessica wasn't: skeptical, practical, and fiercely protective of her older sister. At 42, she worked as a financial advisor and had developed a healthy suspicion of anything that seemed too good to be true. "He's not perfect," Jessica protested, stirring sugar into her latte. "He's just kind. And he actually listens when I talk about work or Emma. When's the last time a man did that?" Rebecca studied her sister's face, noting the way Jessica's entire demeanor had brightened over the past few weeks. "I'm happy you're happy, Jess. Just be careful, okay? You have such a generous heart and not everyone deserves it." Jessica nodded, but privately she felt that Rebecca was being overly cautious. David had never asked for anything inappropriate, never pushed for personal information beyond what she was comfortable sharing. Their conversations had evolved from text messages to lengthy phone calls, and Jessica found herself looking forward to hearing his voice each day. "Good morning, beautiful." David's familiar voice came through her phone as Jessica prepared breakfast one Tuesday morning. Emma was already at school for an early morning debate team meeting, leaving Jessica alone with her butterflies. "Good morning yourself," Jessica replied, unable to suppress her smile. "How's the weather in Dubai?" "Hot as always," David chuckled. "But talking to you makes everything better. I have to tell you, Jessica, these past few weeks have meant more to me than you know. I haven't felt this connected to someone in years." Jessica's heart fluttered. "I feel the same way, David. I keep wondering if this is all too good to be real." "It's real," David assured her, his voice warm and sincere. "I know the distance makes things complicated, but I want you to know that what we have is special to me. I'm actually hoping to wrap up this project sooner than expected. I'd love nothing more than to meet you in person." As the weeks turned into months, Jessica found herself increasingly invested in their relationship. David shared photos of his work sites, told her about the challenges of working in a foreign country, and painted vivid pictures of the life they could build together once he returned to the States. He spoke of taking Emma out for father-daughter dinners, of weekend trips to the mountains, of growing old together. Emma noticed the change in her mother immediately. Jessica seemed lighter, happier, and more confident than she'd been since the divorce. While Emma was initially pleased to see her mother so joyful, she began to notice small inconsistencies in the stories her mother shared about David. "Mom, didn't you say David was from Portland?" Emma asked one evening as they prepared dinner together. "Yes, why?" "It's just, yesterday you mentioned he grew up near the beach, but Portland's not really a beach town." Jessica paused in her chopping of vegetables. "He lived in different places growing up. His family moved around a lot because of his father's job." Emma nodded, but filed the information away. As someone who'd grown up with social media and the internet, she had an almost instinctive awareness of when details didn't quite align. The first request for money came in David's 4th month of their relationship. Jessica was getting ready for work when her phone rang, and David's voice sounded strained and worried. "Jessica, I'm so sorry to bother you with this, but I don't know who else to turn to," he began, his usual confidence replaced by obvious distress. "What's wrong? You sound upset." "There's been an accident on the job site. One of my workers was seriously injured, and he doesn't have proper insurance. The company is trying to avoid responsibility, and his family is asking for help with medical expenses. I've contributed what I can, but..." Jessica's nurturing instincts kicked in immediately. "How much do they need?" "I hate to even ask this, but if you could spare $500, just until I can sort things out with the insurance company, it would save this family from financial ruin." $500 was a significant amount for Jessica, representing nearly a week's worth of groceries and utilities. But the thought of an injured worker's family in distress tugged at her heartstrings. "Of course," she said without hesitation. "How do I send it?" David's relief was palpable. "You're an angel, Jessica. I'll send you the wire transfer information. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as the insurance situation is resolved." Jessica sent the money that afternoon, feeling good about helping someone in need. David's gratitude was overwhelming, and his promises to repay her seemed entirely sincere. Emma noticed her mother checking their bank account more frequently over the following weeks, and the usual grocery shopping trips seemed more conservative than usual. "Everything okay, Mom?" Emma asked one evening, finding Jessica staring at bills spread across the kitchen table. "Just budgeting," Jessica replied quickly, gathering the papers. "Nothing to worry about." But Emma was beginning to worry. Her mother seemed more secretive lately, taking phone calls in her bedroom and quickly closing her laptop when Emma entered the room. The second request came 6 weeks later. This time, David explained that customs officials were demanding unexpected fees for equipment he needed to ship back to the United States. The amount was larger, $1,200, but David's explanation seemed reasonable, and his distress felt genuine. Jessica found herself dipping into her small emergency fund, justifying the expense by telling herself that David would repay her once he returned home. Their phone conversations had become even more intimate, with David speaking of marriage and their future together with such conviction that Jessica had begun to believe it was inevitable. "I can't wait to hold you in my arms," David would whisper during their late-night calls. "You've saved me in more ways than you know, Jessica. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making you happy." Rebecca noticed the change during their next coffee date. Jessica seemed distracted, and when the check came, she hesitated before reaching for her wallet. "My treat," Rebecca said quickly, noticing her sister's discomfort. "Everything all right, Jess?" "Fine," Jessica replied, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just some unexpected expenses lately." Rebecca wanted to press further, but Jessica quickly changed the subject to Emma's upcoming senior year preparations. It was Emma who first noticed the photo inconsistencies. While her mother was at work, Emma decided to look up David's social media profiles, curious to see more photos of the man who had captured her mother's heart so completely. What she found made her stomach drop. David's dating profile photos appeared to be lifted from a fitness model's Instagram account. The man in the photos was indeed handsome and appeared to be in his 50s, but his name was actually Marcus Rodriguez, and he lived in California with his wife and 2 children. Emma's hands shook as she scrolled through Marcus's real social media profiles, seeing photos that David had cropped and used to create his fake identity. The construction site photos David had shared were also stolen, taken from various construction company websites and architectural blogs. Emma's mind raced as she considered how to tell her mother. Jessica had been so happy lately, so hopeful about the future. But she couldn't let her mother continue to be deceived. That evening, Emma approached her mother carefully. "Mom, can we talk about David?" Jessica looked up from her nursing journals, immediately defensive. "What about him?" "I did some research online, and I found some things that don't match up with what he's told you." Jessica's expression hardened. "Emma, I know you're trying to protect me, but you don't understand adult relationships. Sometimes people are private about certain things for good reasons." "Mom, the photos he's using aren't really him. They belong to a married man in California named Marcus Rodriguez." "That's impossible," Jessica said firmly. "I've talked to David on the phone dozens of times. I know his voice, his laugh, his personality." Emma pulled out her laptop and showed her mother the side-by-side comparison of David's dating profile and Marcus's real social media accounts. "Look at these photos, Mom. They're identical." Jessica stared at the screen, her face pale. "There has to be an explanation. Maybe someone stole his photos to create fake profiles. That happens all the time." "Mom," Emma said gently, "when's the last time you video chatted with David?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment. His camera on his phone is broken, and the internet connection where he's staying isn't reliable enough for video calls. Emma felt her heart break for her mother. "Has he asked you for money?" Jessica's silence was answer enough. "How much, Mom?" "It was for emergencies," Jessica whispered. "A worker was injured, and then there were customs fees for his equipment." "How much?" $2,000 total, but he's going to pay it back when he gets home." Emma pulled out her phone and called her Aunt Rebecca. "We need you to come over. It's about Mom and David." Rebecca arrived within 30 minutes, her face grim as Emma explained what she'd discovered. Together, they sat with Jessica and gently walked her through the evidence. "We need to dig deeper," Rebecca said, her financial advisor instincts kicking in. "If this person is sophisticated enough to create such an elaborate fake identity, he's probably running multiple scams simultaneously." Over the next several hours, Emma and Rebecca worked together to trace David's digital footprint. They found multiple dating profiles using the same stolen photos but with different names and backstories. Some claimed to be doctors working with Doctors Without Borders, others were military personnel stationed overseas, and still others were businessmen working on international projects. Jessica sat quietly as the evidence mounted, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. "I'm so stupid," she finally whispered. "No," Emma said firmly, moving to sit beside her mother. "You're not stupid. You're trusting and kind, and someone took advantage of that." Rebecca nodded in agreement. "These scammers are professionals, Jess. They know exactly what to say to make people fall for them. You're not the first person this has happened to, and unfortunately, you won't be the last." "What do I do now?" Jessica asked, tears streaming down her face. "We're going to set a trap," Emma said, her voice filled with determination. "And we're going to expose him." The next evening, Jessica sent David a message explaining that she'd received an unexpected insurance settlement from a minor car accident and asking if they could video chat to celebrate together. She explained that she'd borrowed a friend's high-speed internet connection, so the video quality should be perfect. David's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "I'd love nothing more than to see your beautiful face, my love. Tomorrow evening, same time as always?" Jessica's hands trembled as she typed her response. "I can't wait." Emma and Rebecca spent the day preparing. Emma had researched the technical aspects of tracing IP addresses and recording video calls, while Rebecca had contacted both local police and the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center to report the fraud. As the appointed time approached, the three women gathered around Jessica's laptop. Emma had set up screen recording software, and Rebecca had a notebook ready to document everything David said. "Remember," Rebecca said gently, placing a hand on her sister's shoulder, "the goal is to get him to admit what he's been doing and to gather evidence. We need him to incriminate himself." Jessica nodded, though her face was pale with anxiety. Despite everything she now knew, part of her still hoped there would be some reasonable explanation. The video call connected at exactly 8 o'clock Cs. The screen showed a dimly lit room, and after a moment, a figure appeared. It was clearly not the man from the stolen photos. Instead, a thin man in his 30s with receding hair and thick glasses sat before a cheap webcam. "David?" Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. The man's eyes widened in panic as he realized his mistake. He'd forgotten to turn off his camera or hadn't realized it was functioning. "Jessica, I can explain." "You're not who you said you were, are you?" Jessica's voice trembled as she stared at the computer screen, her world crashing down around her. The man began to stammer, clearly realizing he'd been caught. "Listen, I can explain everything." "Explain what?" Emma interjected, leaning into view of the camera. "Explain how you stole photos from Marcus Rodriguez's Instagram account? Explain how you've been scamming my mother out of her savings?" Rebecca moved closer to the screen. "We know about the other profiles. James the doctor, Michael the soldier, Robert the businessman. How many women are you currently deceiving?" The man's face cycled through several emotions before settling on anger. "You don't understand. Your mother was happy. I made her happy. Isn't that worth something?" "You made her happy with lies," Emma shot back, "and you stole her money." "The money was voluntary," the man protested. "She chose to send it." "Based on false pretenses," Rebecca interjected. "That's called fraud." Jessica found her voice again. "What's your real name?" The man hesitated, then seemed to deflate. Kevin Walsh." Where are you really calling from, Kevin? Chicago. Not Dubai? Kevin shook his head. I've never been to Dubai. I've barely been outside of Illinois. Jessica felt a strange mix of relief and devastation wash over her. The relief came from knowing she wasn't crazy, that her instincts about the inconsistencies had been correct. The devastation came from realizing that the connection she'd felt, the love she'd believed in, had been entirely fabricated. How many other women? Jessica asked quietly. Kevin looked down at his hands. I don't know. A lot. We're recording this conversation, Kevin, Rebecca informed him. And we've already reported you to the authorities. You might want to consider contacting a lawyer. The color drained from Kevin's face. Wait, you can't. We can and we have, Emma said firmly. You chose to steal from people who trusted you. Now you get to face the consequences. Kevin began to plead, making promises to repay the money and begging them not to involve the police, but Rebecca ended the video call. The room was silent for a long moment as the three women processed what had just happened. Jessica was the first to speak. I feel like such a fool. Emma immediately wrapped her arms around her mother. You're not a fool, Mom. You're a loving person who believed someone when they said they cared about you. That's not foolish, that's human. Rebecca nodded in agreement. Kevin Walsh is the fool if he thinks he can get away with this. We have recorded evidence of his confession, and the authorities take this kind of fraud very seriously. Over the following weeks, Jessica worked with federal investigators to provide evidence against Kevin Walsh. It turned out that Emma and Rebecca's suspicions were correct. Kevin was running an elaborate operation targeting lonely women across the country. The investigation revealed that he had stolen over $50,000 from various victims over the past 2 years. Jessica's case became part of a larger investigation that ultimately led to Kevin's arrest and prosecution. While the legal process was lengthy, Jessica found strength in knowing that her willingness to come forward had helped protect other potential victims. The emotional healing took longer than the legal process. Jessica struggled with feelings of embarrassment and self-doubt, questioning her judgment and wondering if she'd ever be able to trust again. I used to pride myself on being a good judge of character, she confided to Rebecca during one of their coffee dates. How could I have been so wrong about someone? Because he was a professional manipulator, Rebecca replied. He studied what people wanted to hear and became an expert at saying exactly those things. It's not a reflection of your judgment, it's a reflection of his skill at deception. Emma proved to be Jessica's greatest source of support during the recovery process. The teenager's maturity and compassion helped her mother rebuild her confidence step by step. You know what I learned from all this? Emma said one evening as they prepared dinner together, a ritual that had become even more precious to both of them. What's that, sweetheart? That you're stronger than you know. When you found out the truth, you didn't just hide from it. You faced it head on and helped make sure Kevin couldn't hurt anyone else. I'm proud of you, Mom. Jessica felt tears prick her eyes. I'm proud of you too, Em. I don't know what I would have done without you and Aunt Rebecca. You would have figured it out eventually, Emma said with certainty. Because underneath all that kindness and trust, you have good instincts. Kevin almost fooled you, but he didn't break you. 3 months after Kevin Walsh's arrest, Jessica received a call from the prosecutor's office. Kevin had pled guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud and identity theft. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. Jessica felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Justice had been served, and Kevin would no longer be able to prey on vulnerable women looking for companionship and love. How do you feel? Rebecca asked when Jessica shared the news. Jessica considered the question carefully, relieved, vindicated, and surprisingly, grateful. Grateful? This whole experience taught me things about myself I didn't know. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I have people who love me enough to fight for me, and that my instincts are actually pretty good when I trust them. Emma looked up from her college application essays, which she'd been working on at the kitchen table. Are you going to start dating again? Jessica laughed. Someday, maybe. But next time, I'm going to insist on meeting in person within the first week. And I'm definitely going to run any potential suitors past my very smart daughter and my very protective sister. Deal, Emma and Rebecca said in unison. As the evening sun streamed through their apartment windows, casting the same warm shadows that had been there the day Jessica first created her dating profile, she felt a profound sense of peace. The experience with Kevin had been painful and costly, but it had also brought her family closer together and taught her valuable lessons about trust, instincts, and resilience. Jessica Turner had always been the type of person who saw the good in everyone. That hadn't changed, but now she also knew that seeing the good in people didn't mean ignoring red flags or abandoning common sense. She could be both trusting and wise, both open-hearted and cautious. Most importantly, she had learned that she didn't need validation from a romantic partner to feel complete. She had Emma's respect, Rebecca's fierce loyalty, and her own hard-won wisdom. Those were riches that no scammer could ever steal. As she watched Emma work on her college essays and listened to Rebecca share stories from her day, Jessica realized that the love she'd been seeking had been right there all along. It just hadn't come in the package she'd expected. The Kevin Walsh chapter of her life was closed, but Jessica Turner's story was far from over, and this time she would be the author of her own happy ending. Thank you for listening until the end. If you enjoyed the story, please consider leaving us a like. This helps us reach more people.